In 2004, Sony entered the handheld market with the PSP to compete with the Nintendo DS. Sales of the PSP initially were slow, but in Japan, with the success of the Monster Hunter series, the system started to become moderately successful. While it did not match the sales of the mighty Nintendo DS, the PSP sold 80 million units when it was all said and done, which incidentally was around the same numbers as the Game Boy Advance. But Sony learnt much from the PSP. In 2009, there were rumours of a successor. Initially, there was some confusion about the system, with patents appearing showing that the hardware looked like a PSP Go, but designed to be used as a phone. The PSP2 hardware was rumoured to be something designed for the Sony XPERIA line of phones. The XPERIA Play ended up being a dedicated Android device that ran a PlayStation 1 emulator developed by Sony, with slide-out PSP-style controls. However, it was not the successor to the PSP. In January 2011, Sony at their PlayStation Meeting conference in Japan unveiled a new handheld with the codename Next Generation Portable, and aimed for visuals that matched the Sony PlayStation 3. By E3 of the same year, Sony announced the PlayStation Vita and would release later that year in Japan and in February of 2012 for the rest of the world. Initial sales were positive. The Vita sold 300,000 units in its first week in Japan and 200,000 in North America, but sales leveled off quickly, and by the end of 2018, the estimated total sales were around 16 million. Compared to the PSP, the Vita was a bit of a flop, but this was only when we compare sales numbers. The hardware itself for 2012 was quite impressive, boasting a 5-inch 16:9 aspect ratio OLED screen with multi-touch and supporting 960 by 544 screen resolution with 17 million colors. The Vita is powered by a quad-core ARM Cortex A9 chip, and the GPU is a quad-core PowerVR SGX 543. The handheld comes with 512 MB of RAM and 128 MB for dedicated graphics RAM. Compared to the Nintendo DS, these were far superior specs. The Vita also used cartridges known as PS Vita cards, but also digital distribution via the PlayStation Network. And in 2020, you can still access the PlayStation Network from your Vita and download games. Sony, or specifically Jim Ryan, the current CEO, made the announcement at the end of 2019 that the PlayStation Vita was all but dead and Sony would no longer be considering handhelds as the future for the company. They were effectively getting out of that race. But the Vita means life, and there is still much left of it in this aging handheld. Well guys, I've done it again. I've picked up a PS Vita. This is the 1000 model with the OLED screen. This is the original PlayStation Vita model that is considered a better model than the 2000 model, which was a refinement of the original. Picked this up from GameStop. This is a premium refurbished system. And once again, I'm going to open this up, take a look at it, see what's going on. We're going to go ahead and get it modded for Homebrew. And I'm going to talk about why the Vita is such an awesome system in 2020 and why you want to consider maybe picking one of these up. The games that are available for the system are still exceptionally good to play. And then you get the added bonus of simply being able to mod this system for Homebrew and getting access to some of, quite frankly, some of the best handheld Homebrew that you're going to find on any system. So we got our PlayStation Vita. Let's go ahead and see what we got going on here. So first of all, it's coming with the original, not aftermarket, original power pack, which is a good sign. And then we've got the power cable. And then we have the system itself. Let's go ahead and open this up and take a look. Now this is the PS Vita. Now this is the 1001 model. Now the 1000 model was, I believe, the 3G capable one that came with the AT&T 3G network as well. This is the Wi-Fi edition of the original PlayStation Vita with the OLED screen. The condition is pretty good. It's got a lot of smudges all over it. You can probably see that, a lot of fingerprints. Some of them are mine, but some of them obviously are the person that was handling this before me. So first thing I'm gonna do is just wipe this all down, and then we're gonna power this up here real quick and see if it works, and then we'll see what version of the firmware it's on, and then of course, we're going to go ahead and mod this thing. Before we mod the system, let's make sure we can play some games and the system actually works. And while we're here, the PlayStation Vita is probably one of the most underrated systems ever released, with so many great games available for it. Some of my personal favorites are Killzone Mercenary, that was released in 2013 and developed by Guerrilla Cambridge. Before Killzone, there wasn't really much in the way of a portable FPS game, and it was brilliantly received when released. The graphics are top quality, and you can even still play Killzone online in 2020 on the PlayStation Network. Persona 4 Golden regularly ends up in many people's best PS Vita game of all time. As an enhanced version of the PlayStation 2 original, this is a true system seller, and it's an excellent Japanese RPG that has over 80 hours of gameplay, and if you haven't already played Persona 4 Golden, I recommend you check it out immediately. You will absolutely love the game. As a fan of arcade games and Llamasoft, TXK is a classic game that is based on Tempest, developed by Jeff Minter, and it's essentially an updated version of Tempest 2000 for the Atari Jaguar. TXK is an absolute classic game on the PlayStation Vita, and having a portable version of Tempest is one of my favorite reasons to own a PlayStation Vita. Tearaway by Media Molecule is another standout. On the surface, it's a platform adventure game, but the game itself taps into the entire set of features of the Vita, including the accelerometer, the front touch, the back touch, as well as the camera. Now, this may sound like a pain and not worth the trouble, but this game really shines and makes these features enjoyable, and it ends up becoming one of the best games on the system. There are also a ton of great games on the Vita and some ports as well. Another personal favourite is Need for Speed Most Wanted. Essentially, this is a one-to-one port of the PlayStation 3 version, but other than a graphical decrease for the Vita version, the game looks, sounds and plays fantastic. It's a shame that the Vita is no longer being developed for, but where the games stop is where the homebrew scene steps in. So we are on system 3.73, which means we can run Homebrew on this, and I tell everyone the best way if you want to mod your PlayStation Vita, rather than me giving you a comprehensive guide on how to do that in this video, I'm going to direct you to a website called vita.hacks.guide. Vita.hacks.guide is an always up-to-date one-stop shop for modding the PlayStation Vita. The site will walk you through step-by-step instructions, and fortunately it's very easy to do. As I'm running firmware 3.73, I will need to install H-Encore or Hencore. Following this process, after a few minutes, I have the Homebrew application known as Vita Shell installed, and my PlayStation Vita is successfully modded. Now we are ready to take a look at some Homebrew. First up is the Vita's killer homebrew app, Adrenaline. Adrenaline is an application that unlocks the PSP emulation that's built into the Vita. The way it works is simple, just copy your ISO files to the PSP/ISO folder, launch Adrenaline, and then you will see that the system is running in PSP mode. When you select the game menus, your ISOs will show up, and then you can launch any game just as if you were running on an original PSP. Everything is 100% playable and the emulation is awesome. Adrenaline unlocks the power of the Vita, and it's an essential piece of homebrew for any modded Vita out there. Want to know what homebrew is actually available to download on the Vita? Then you are going to want the Vita Homebrew Browser app. I consider this another must-have utility, and it's nicely grouped into different sections, including the new releases. You can download the files directly to your memory card and then use Vita Shell to install them. Overall, this is a very useful utility. But what about the emulators? Well, look no further than RETROARCH, available on the PS Vita, and overall it runs very well. In general, the Vita runs most 8 and 16-bit emulators quite nicely. Recently, there's been some improvements to Game Boy Advance emulation that runs great, but keep in mind for some of the more powerful stuff like the Sega 32X, it still runs a little slow. Arcade emulation is also pretty decent. As long as you stick to MAME 2000, you'll get a mostly good experience. But for me, RETROARCH on the Vita is best when you want to complement it with the NES, GBA, Super NES, TurboGrafx, Sega Genesis, Sega CD, and Game Boy games. With these systems at your disposal, you're really going to enjoy the handheld experience. Then there are the ports, and this is for me where the Vita really shines as a killer handheld. There are so many great ports. Duke Nukem 3D is one that I like to play, and AM2R or another Metroid remake is excellent, but unfortunately it's not 100% completable. But if I had to pick, I would say that Vita Quake 3 would take the crown. It's an excellent handheld version of id Software's Quake 3, complete with networking for online play, and it runs at great frame rates. But I must stress, there are so many great ports to the Vita. I've even seen ports of Diablo running recently. The utilities are also top quality. If you mod the Vita, then you can apply custom themes, and there are some different theme managers that will manage this for you. Overall, Homebrew on the Vita is excellent, and I can rave about it for another 20 minutes. The handheld has aged, no doubt about that, but it's still very capable of some amazing things, and if you manage to track one down at a good price, or you have one sitting in your drawer wondering what to do with yours, consider modding your system and really opening up some of the amazing things that you can do with the handheld beyond playing the commercial games. Now before I go guys, we are going to be giving away this PlayStation Vita that you saw on the channel. So in order to get entered, just click on the link in the description below. There will be a competition link. Get entered and good luck. We'll be drawing a winner in 2 weeks from now. So get yourself entered, good luck, and hopefully you'll be the winner. Some people ask me, will you ship this around the world? Yes, I will. In fact, the last competition I did was an Nvidia Shield TV that I shipped over to England. So there's no issues with shipping overseas. So don't be afraid to get entered. Good luck, and hopefully you'll be a winner. Well, that will do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look at the PlayStation Vita. Let me know what you think about the system in 2020. I still think the Vita is an excellent system, a very much a misunderstood system, and it's a huge shame that Sony is no longer supporting the Vita and handhelds going forward. But I do really enjoy the PlayStation Vita. It's such an awesome system, and it really still holds up well in 2020, and in some ways it's a superior system to the Nintendo Switch in that it can really offer so much more for your money. Well guys, we're going to leave it here for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, you know what to do. Leave me a thumbs up, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.